Again, good afternoon. My name is Graham Watts. I'm the Director of Operations, and today we'll be going over custom reports. This is intended to be a basic reporting 101 type of webinar. We can certainly go on to much more advanced features, and I would recommend reaching out to us at support@BeyondPay if we get you interested and you wanted to deep dive. And I do recognize a lot of the names and the attendees. Hopefully, we'll show you something you didn't already know or just kind of reintroduce you to stuff you're already doing. And again, just reach out. And the same applies for myself as a director of operations. I've not spoken to all of you, and if you ever need to speak to me for any reason, feel free to reach out to me at support@beyondpay.com. Today, here's a minor agenda on your screen. Today, we intend to have a simple overview of custom reportings, and then I will go ahead and show you guys many of the standard features of our reporting through the 3 middle bullets, and at the end, we'll have a brief question and answer session. It's certainly in the 35 minutes we're going to be presenting, we wouldn't be able to cover all of the functionality. So again, this is intended to be introductory, 101, and to get you guys asking questions and following up with us. So without further ado, I will go ahead and share my screen for BeyondPay. And here we have a BeyondPay screen. For those of you that may be a little unfamiliar with what you're looking at, this is our new UI. We're very happy to present it. I know that not all of our clients have been exposed to the new UI yet. We are happy to share it with you guys, and this is the future of BeyondPay. So again, if you have questions, please reach out to your CSR, and we'd be happy to turn on the new UI for you. For the purpose of the training, I am going to spend most of the time in one of the main sections of our payroll, and that is my employee information. And on this screen, I'm going to start with the first bulleted item, rows on page. You'll notice in the upper left corner, rows on page is 10. So on this 21 employee roster, we would have to hit next page 1 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 of 3. This is one of the more easy changes you can make. The rows on page is a drop down. I tend to go all the way to 200, even some have 500 and 1,000. This particular view has 200 rows on page. Upon switching it to 200 and hitting the refresh, you no longer have multiple screens. You can now view all of your data on one screen. Now that we have all the data on one screen, the next step I wanted to show you guys is filters. Static to just about every screen in BeyondPay are these white filters below the headers of each column. In each one, you can begin to filter for specific data elements that you would like to look for. So in this example, I'll search for a first name starting with Jennifer. Upon hitting enter or the refresh wheel, I will have all of the employees named Jennifer. I will pause, and you may wonder why you're seeing 2 versions of Jennifer Aniston. This particular demo company is a multi-EIN company. In other words, more than one company roll up under one BeyondPay window, and Jennifer happens to work for both EINs. I can go ahead and show you how to bring in that EIN column in just a minute in the next section for adding and removing columns. But before doing so, I wanted to show you the next step for filters. I'll clear Jennifer from first name and hit enter. You'll notice that both first and last name have starts with. In that dropdown, there's a number of different English variables you can use to filter your data. I will go ahead and use starts with to demonstrate. So if all the first names that start with J, you'll see this list of 6 rows. Under last name, if I also say starts with J, you'll notice I'm down to just 1 row. That is because using 2 filters is always an and, not an or. So to say a first name that starts with J and a last name that starts with J, Jennifer Jones is the only employee that meets that. Now, this is something that hopefully you guys will be new to very many of you. You can do OR filters, and I'll do that here under custom filters. Now, custom filters may not be turned on for all clients. Again, reach out to your CSR and we can certainly turn on custom filter for almost any report or view you have. If you can't see it on your screen, it's very possible you just have to click the filter button in the top right corner and it will drop it down. Once you have the custom filter available to you, you can simply click Add New. Within this screen, you have to start adding your criteria. I will click the Add button and I will do a similar process that I did before. First name starts with J. But now I'm going to hit OR. If you recall, it was only an AND on the static filters, but on a custom filter, you can have it be an OR. And I'll have last name starts with J. And if you recall, it was only showing one item for Jennifer Jones, but now that I have an OR filter under custom filters, you'll notice that I'm getting 6 rows. This is everyone that has a first name or a last name that starts with J. And you can toggle that setting under enable and disable. So currently it's enabled. By hitting disable, you go back to having no filters at all, or whatever the last setting was. Again, custom filters may not be enabled for all clients. Please reach out to BeyondPay if you'd like to utilize them. The next step would be adding and removing columns. This again is something that I think is really one of the most useful aspects of the BeyondPay system. Every view is a report, every report is a view. And you can bring almost all of your data into what you're looking at, depending on if you're in the employee section or the payroll section, time and attendance, HR. Very many of the most common data elements can be brought into the view and saved. By doing so, you use the Select Columns button in the top right corner. By clicking Select Columns, it opens up on the left-hand panel every available field to you in this particular segment of the database. You certainly wouldn't want to scroll infinitely to find what you're looking for. It's much easier to click the magnifying glass and begin typing just a few words or a few letters of what you're looking for. In this particular case, I brought over the hire date. And I will also bring in the EIN, which I referenced previously. You move them over by clicking the blue arrow, which will move them to the right side column, which represents what is in your report. Once they've moved over, you can move the data up and down using the blue arrows to position them where you'd like them to be. In this particular case, I will put hire date after the last name, and I will put the EIN before the first name. By hitting the blue Select Columns button, you've now brought in those additional data elements. Employee EIN, and this is where you can see that Jennifer works for both widgets and digits as well as number crunchers. And you can see that she's had 2 different hire dates, and all of the employees' hire dates are now within the system. Once you've brought in columns, applied filters, custom filters, if you'd like to save your settings so that you don't lose them, it's as simple as Settings, Save Settings. In here, you can give it a plain English name, whatever is going to allow you to remember what your setting was. I might say employees with EIN and hire. Again, you can give it whatever name you'd like. Default means that you want this to be the first view you see whenever you come to this section of the database. It doesn't have to be default. That would just mean you have to navigate it to it later. You can have an infinite number of saved reports. I'm going to go ahead and check default, which means this is what I want to see every time I come to my employee's employee information. Run immediately can almost always be checked. What it means is that by launching this screen, it will launch the report. It tends to work fine only if you're in the 5,000, 10,000 employee range, which you might not want to run run a report automatically, as it could slow down your system if you didn't intend to launch that report. So at this time, I'll go ahead and hit save. And you'll notice the name here. It's in a drop-down. There's a couple of different names. I've just saved this one as employees with EIN and higher. One more advanced step is once you've saved a report, you've only saved it for yourself. If you'd like to share the save report with other administrators or people with access within your company, you can then settings, load save settings. This may look a little bit different, again, for the new UI, but it will be very similar. And within the load save settings, there's a pencil icon. It's the third icon from the right. It's from here you can tell it this is my personal setting, means only you can see it. But if you say this is my personal setting and visible to others, you can then share it with an individual, multiple individuals, or leaving it blank would be anyone that has access. And then company settings means it will show up for them automatically. They don't need to search for it. I won't spend too much time there other than settings, load save settings, click the pencil, and the most common switch is to say, this is my personal setting visible to others. And that way, other people within your office can access a report that you saved rather than having to create it themselves. The next step I wanted to show is grouping and sorting. This is one of the more common things, but maybe something you don't use often. Above every header is an up and down arrow for sorting ascending and descending. So I will hover above last name, and I will hit the down arrow for sort descending. Now Kathy Watts, no relation, has come to the top of the report because her last name is the descending. Hitting up on the sort ascending will return it to its previous format. You can sort by multiple elements. By holding Control on your keyboard, the next thing you click will sort it by last name, then first name. And you can continue all the way through to every field on your report. You can hold in Control and it will sort in the order in which you click the up arrows. I also wanted to show grouping. The best data element on this current report would most likely be default location. It's a good diverse set of information. And when hovering above default location, when you click the static G, and you'll notice it's at every header, you get what would look to be a subtotal for each section. The screen does become a little busy, and I will show you how we work around that. But within this screen, you'll notice there's Allentown. It will automatically alphabetize itself by the data you grouped by. So Allentown went to the top, Boston came second, and Chicago, and so forth. Each Allentown, Boston, Chicago only have one employee. It's not until we get to New Jersey that we see there's a number of employees both in that default work location. At this time, I will show you a very brief introduction to custom columns. And it's one of the more common, easy uses of a custom column. And why I want to show you that. So for this data element, New Jersey, if I continue to roll my mouse, the header for New Jersey is no longer visible on the screen. You may not remember that that's the header that existed above you. A very common practice is to access settings, custom settings. Within here, there is 25 custom columns that you can add to your report. A custom column is one of the more powerful reporting elements we have and would be a separate training unto itself, which we will do at a later time. For now, I intend to show you an introductory custom column, and please feel free to explore and try these yourself. The worst you're going to do is have a syntax error and have a custom column that doesn't work. Once you've checked the box to enable a custom column, it becomes available to you. You can give it a name of what you'd like, and I'm going to call it location. This white area you've accessed is where you can begin writing your custom columns. I am not going to train it now again, but I will at least show you this gray function box gives you a list of all of the numeric and math, if statements, return month, all of the functions inherent to our custom columns. They write very similar to Excel, but it is not Excel. It is written in XML, I believe, and it's something that anyone at BeyondPay can help you with. Please reach out to us if you need something that's going to concatenate data or an if statement or adding days to a date. But for now, I'm going to spend my time in columns. Within the custom settings, by clicking the columns, it's essentially the same data set of information that existed when you added columns previously in the training. Here you can bring a duplicate version of the data. Again, with a lot of variables, not necessarily something you want to scroll through. This is a web browser. Control F does work. Just like any browser, Control F, I happen to be using Firefox. In the bottom left corner, Control F brought up a search. I'm going to search for a location. I tend to search from the bottom. If you search from the top, it's going to pick the body of the report first. Location happens to be one of the more prevalent data sets within this report. I'm just going to continue to hit the up arrow until I find what I'm looking for. And I'm going to bring in the employee's default location name. The right field is the description. The left field, the blue, is the actual data element you need. You can either copy it or click it. And it is now within the body, within the report writing section of the custom column. Now you can certainly hit use settings here, or you can click on the columns tab in the top left corner. This should look a little more familiar to you. You can search for the word custom with the magnifying glass, or it will always be at the bottom. And I'm going to move it over. It will always move to the bottom, and I'm going to move it up. I put it right above first name, and then I hit use settings. What I've done is brought in another version of location into the report. So while we still have the subtotal here, New Jersey, as you scroll down, you'll no longer lose what that subtotal was. It'll give you a unique data element to let you know which section of the report you're in. If you want to ungroup, there are two ways to do that. You can click the ungroup in gray here. It's often overlooked. Or the more formal way is to click the blue arrow in the top left corner. It slides over and shows you what you're grouped by, and you can ungroup by hitting the U. They'll both do the same thing. And you'll notice when ungrouped, we have redundant information. I have my custom location data element. I also have the original data element that I had before. So you typically wouldn't want to replicate data unless you intend to group by one and have your static version next to the other data element. The next step that I wanted to show you guys is the custom settings. Settings, custom settings. And this is where we put in the custom columns, but instead I'll click on column settings. Here is where you can give, when you bring your data in, it brings in the column name that is inherent to the system. Perhaps you want to have a different name. For example, instead of first name, I will just call it first. Instead of last name, I will just call it last. And maybe employee ID, I'll put in employee number. Upon hitting use setting, you'll notice that the header has changed first, last, and EE number. Settings, custom settings, and you'll also notice you can format. For example, date hired is the system knows it's an actual date. So rather than having the 8-digit date, perhaps you would like to have a full formal date. You can do that by clicking on the inherent magnifying glass, selecting the flag, and then use settings. And now you notice that the date hired is in the format we selected. Settings, custom settings, and you can also specify alignment right and left and specify width. Again, more of the advanced settings. The other tab that I wanted to spend time on was the extra settings. This is most commonly useful when you're going to be exporting your data. One of the things that is infinitely useful with BeyondPay is the speed at which you can get your own data out of BeyondPay into Excel, PDF, CSV. Whenever you export data, you'll notice that gray header bar that tells you the settings you use and the date you exported it. If you don't want to see that header bar, you intend to use the data, just simply hit the drop down and say, I do not need to see the display header footer. The same applies for totals. I often turn off totals. Totals are very useful, but not if you intend to be manipulating the data. You tend to just delete them. So tell it you don't want to display the totals. And lastly, this one becomes very useful. By default, the BeyondPay system exports blank columns as a dash. A dash is not numeric, and it doesn't necessarily know how to handle that in Excel if you intend on doing math or pivot tables. So by unchecking the export dash, use default, and populating it with a 0, what you're telling the system is any blank field auto-populate with a 0. It just makes it that much easier when you decide to manipulate your own data. I'll use settings. You won't see most of what I did. Again, that only applies for exporting. To export, it's the top right column, and it will give you all of the available formats that we can export to. The newest version of Excel, the older versions in CSV are the most common. There is occasion to use text in PDF. Again, if you don't save settings, the system will not remember the changes you made. If you ever want to return back to your dashboard, the BeyondPay logo is a quick and easy way to get there. I will click on the BeyondPay logo. It will return me to the new UI dashboard. I'm going to re-access where we were, employee information. And you'll notice, for example, that the date hired didn't retain that longer version as I did not save settings. Had I wanted to keep it, again, it was settings, save settings, and I wanted to show that you do have the option to save, which is override my current settings, or save as, which is save another version of the same report. So for example, if you've added a column or removed a column, but you don't necessarily want to override your previous version of that report, you can certainly save a separate version and share that with anyone else in your office, or you can continue to override this version. I think I'm a little ahead of time. I did cover all of the agenda items. I can certainly open up a little extra time for question and answers, and I can conclude kind of the way I started and let you guys know that reporting the access to your own information is something that BeyondPay does better than anyone else in the industry. Any one of us are more than happy to set up a training with you. We will have a more advanced custom reporting webinar for more of the functions and custom columns, ifs and lookups and math. But for now, again, it was intended to be a 101 overview to get you guys grouping and adding rows and bringing in columns and getting you to ask questions that at support@beyondpay.com we'd be happy to answer. So at this time, I'll open it up to question and answers.
And we've got one question. So asking about when you save a report. Why don't you go back into custom settings, save report, the load save settings.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Settings, load save settings.
So this is where you can go in and share a report with somebody else. So go ahead and edit one of those that we're looking at.
Which was the pencil icon.
Yep. So so this is my personal setting. This is my personal setting and is visible to others. And the question was, when you share a report with others, are they able to change the report?
Correct. The answer is they cannot change your version of the report. I always equate it to sending someone a spreadsheet. If you email someone a spreadsheet, once they open it, they can certainly make changes, but it's not going to change your version of that spreadsheet. And the same would apply here. They can save the report for themselves as their own My Report, but it will not change yours.
All right. Another question. How can you delete a report?
Same location, setting, load save settings. And it is possible that you start saving and experimenting and end up with far more reports than you'd like to look at. If you'd like to delete a picture, delete a report, the second icon, which is an X, I'll delete this one called pictures. Warning, do you want to delete it? Yes, I do. And now you'll notice there's only one version of pictures.
It's also worth mentioning some of those reports there don't have an X next to them. So if you edit one of these reports, there's a box that lets you prevent people from saving or deleting a report, which could be handy too. So if you do share a report with like the whole company, you can just have it, and not just from other people, from yourself as well. So you won't accidentally save it. That little checkbox, deletion of this setting is not allowed. You can check that box and now nobody can go in and delete anything. You could always go and uncheck that box and then you can rename it or delete it or whatever. But so if you spend, I've got some reports that I've literally spent a couple hours on, and I would be very sad if somebody changed it or deleted it. So, I'm going in there and unchecking that or checking that box so that nobody can delete it. So at least it doesn't happen by accident. Somebody would have to do it on purpose. We will be releasing a video recording of this. All right, so we will share this with everybody that registered. We'll actually probably end up posting it publicly as well. So it'll be available on YouTube soon.
I don't see any more questions. John, do you?
I got one other question. This might be one worth following up on, but talking about how, sometimes when you're in a report and you want access to a field that you don't have access to. So that is true. There are some reports where you can't access other tables of the system. So for example, if we're looking at let's say a check register report and it's showing a list of all the check registers, I might not be able to pull in a GL code to that report. So there's some reports that just don't really cross-pollinate. So that's true. So if you have that happen, there's a couple things we can do. First off, if it makes sense, we could potentially request it with Kronos development. So, sometimes we are able to add columns and get them into the next release. Sometimes that can happen. If it's more of an obscure request where the tables really aren't aligned at all, sometimes it's not possible. We can utilize middleware to export reports automatically. That's probably outside of the scope of this training session. This is also an opportunity to maybe shoot an email to support@beyondpay.com and we can, take a look at the specific situation. We work with you guys, with our customers all the time, every day, working on different kinds of custom support or custom report situations. So definitely share your situations and we'd be happy to take a look.
Again, I'm on a check register and I attempted to bring in the general ledger. It's not available in this particular section of the database. That's what John is referring to.
Right. So somebody asked, rather than create a custom column for location, could I move the default location up to number 3 column on any report? Yes, you could do it that way. What Graham was trying to show is sometimes when you group data, especially when you group data with a really large report, like maybe you have 1,000 records on a report, and as you're scrolling through that information, sometimes you get lost and you don't know where you're at. So like right now on the screen, you can see New Jersey's highlighted. But if you scroll down just a little bit, now all of a sudden I'm looking at a list of data. I don't remember whether it was New Jersey or New York or where that was in the list. So sometimes it's just handy to pull that in with a custom column. So that's a nice little hack, just a nice little trick that we use. But you could potentially use a different column. You know, technically with department, there's a department name, there's department level 1, level 2, level 3. So you could pull in some more there as well.
I failed to mention one of the more confusing elements is exclamation equals. That just means not equal. It's one of the legacy coding verbiage, but if not equal to is very handy, it's just not, it's one of the ones that's not in plain English. But if you're, rather than starts with or not starts, explanation equal is not equal to.
All right, let's do a last question. I'm not sure I'm actually completely answering this question because the question is centered around timesheets per page. So we might need to follow up on this one individually. But go to the export settings, Graham, and show how to do the page breaks.
Oh.
So this is kind of a neat way if you're grouping your data. So this only works if you're grouping your data. So right now we have it grouped by location. You can group it by your first group, second group, third group, or fourth group, which is kind of cool because now when you print something to a PDF, so you'll have one page for Chicago, one page for New Jersey, one page for New York. It's kind of a neat little trick to be able to get your data on one page per group. I don't think I completely answered your question because it was a little more specific, and I'd need to look into that one if you're talking about timesheets specifically. So shoot your email to support@beyondpay.com and we can take a look at that. All right. All right. Well, thanks for the questions, especially at the end. So at this point, we're going to close it down. So thank you everybody very much for your time. We had a really great turnout, which is cool too. But if you have a question you want answered, please email support@beyondpay.com at this point. Sorry, we're not quite able to go through all the questions, but appreciate all your interest and the extra questions too.
Thank you for your time, and I look forward to working with you guys.